Sudan is locked in a power struggle between the army and a powerful paramilitary group, and it is the people who are suffering. Tanks, artillery, and heavy weaponry deployed by both sides in civilian areas are rocking the nation, while international attempts at mediation falter. We speak to the country's former foreign minister to learn how the situation got here and how to get out of it. This is the InnerView. Mariam Al-Mahdi is a Sudanese politician and the country's former foreign minister. Thank you very much for joining us on the interview. Ma'am, I know it's a difficult time. Before I ask for your analysis, you're in Khartoum. How do you feel? Do you feel safe?
Welcome, Mr. Irfan and Imran, and to your all viewers. And we are very much thankful for giving us the chance to address the world about the agony and the endeavor of the Sudanese people. As you mentioned now, the situation in the whole of the capital, especially the capital, which is the heavily populated area in the Sudan, third of the population of Sudan, are staying here in the capital, not less than 12 million people. We are been for the last 5 days in absolute horror, lack of safety, continuous bombardment, and it's not that even of course many places are in more direct bombardment because unfortunately many of the paramilitary group rapid support force and the military ones are very much inside heavily populated areas. So the bombardment, the aerial bombardment, the artillery are it's affecting the people directly in their homes, killing people. Besides the lack of water, there is absolute no water in more than 70% of the capital. Also, people run out of food. There is no electricity for so many people. So now, even where there is internet, where there is data, but people cannot reach out to each other to know what is happening to their families and loved ones. Many bodies are in the street rotting and with scavenging by dogs, and it's really very inhumane what is taking place now in Sudan. No one is showing mercy to their own people. The protectors, Sudanese armed forces, are the protector of the Sudanese people. They are financed by our own money. They are our own sons. Now we are being bombarded by them. We are being denied humanitarian access by them because they don't want to give any truce to see the other party having rest or having to realign their position because of very small military objectives. They are wasting the tens of hundreds of lives of people.
Yes.
And it is really very bad. Yesterday there was a trial to hold on a truce, but it was devastated in the first few minutes. I wouldn't say the few hours. So people now in very bad shape. Many hospitals are already collapsed because not only because of the medical teams are exhausted and they don't have replacement, but there are no drugs, there is no oxygen, there is no medicine, there is no water, there is no food. So and many of them got bombarded as well. So they became as so the situation is very dire. It's a manifestation of crimes of wars, crimes against humanity in action, and no one bothers for the Sudanese people. And we are supposed to call on them, to call on Al Burhan being the head of the Sovereign Council, and to call on Himeti being his deputy. But now the people we are supposed to call upon for protection are the one who are violating our security, and the world is calling for the last 5 days for them to stop bombarding their people. But it is really, it's a very shameful, sad situation.
I'm so sorry for you and for your nation. How did we get here? How did we get to this point of the power struggle between the head of the army, Burhan, and the head of the RSF, Hemeti, squaring off against each other, risking the lives of their own people, possibly for their own interests? How did we get here in as simple a way as possible for our audience to understand?
Well, this paramilitary force was established by the head of the army to help the army, and through the years, it was more privileged than the army. So many institutional jealousies and problems arose between the two. But at one time, they together, the SAF and the Rapid Support Force, supported the Sudanese revolution, and we tried to establish partnership between them and us as the revolutionary and the civilians. But because of so many political mistakes, and we didn't finish important aspects of the revolution regarding the dismantling of the old regime, regarding the reform in the security sector itself and reform in the state itself. This led to the two important or three important things. The first thing, rivalry and competition arose between the two men, as they were both in absolute power, especially after the coup they have effected against the civilians 1 year and a half ago. Secondly, the old regime, which was already infesting the whole Sudanese state, they reorganized themselves, and they took major positions again, and they started organizing and actually making gap between the two men who were together at some time. Both of them confronted them. The third one is the political issue. We as civilians couldn't find a way to agree on the minimum consensus of whom are the civilians. So in spite of we succeeded in defying the coup by the military, and we succeeded in putting them into terms into dialogue again, they could because of the split between the two of them, they could also split between the two of us. So as we started a very important political operation, which was concluding, which was finding a pertinent or quite apparent support by the Sudanese people, and overwhelming support by the regional and international community to take people back again to an short interim period to end by elections. The rivalry between the two and the lack of trust between the two and between all of us brought us into this nonsensical confrontation. But we cannot deny that there is a major role for the people who are from the previous regime to incite this, and now the lack of trust and the personalization of hatred is making both of them holding the whole Sudan and the safety of the whole Sudanese people besieged.
You say it's nonsensical. From their perspective, it might not be nonsensical. And if you say that the shadow of Omar al-Bashir and his previous regime is still lingering, let's try and understand then. Firstly, are we in a situation where whoever wins becomes ultimately the military dictator in the country, their faction controls the country? And secondly, if there are people from the old regime that are in support of this, do they support any one side over the other from the two fighting forces?
Yes, for the first question, whoever will win will not be a military dictator. There is no place for military rule in Sudan now, unless whoever comes to wipe the whole Sudanese people. They call and the endeavor and the aspiration for civilian rule and for democracy is unquestionable, and all the Sudanese people are fighting for it. So whoever will end this will have to come back into delivering the power to the civilians. Will have to come to having terms of how for the military to go back to the barracks, and how the army to get reformed and to establish one national professional army. This is there is no way other than that. Regarding the support of the previous regime, they haven't hidden it. It is declared by all their leaders in all their positions. They claim to support the Sudanese armed forces, which every Sudanese support the Sudanese armed forces. It is the Sudanese armed forces of the Sudan. It is financed by the Sudan. It is our own sons and brothers. But the Sudanese Armed Forces Rapid Support Force has been established by Sudanese Armed Forces. It has been part of Sudanese Armed Forces. It is by law under Sudanese Armed Forces. So that's why it was the whole thing to work or to establish two militaries as is not at
Right.
all accepted by anybody. That's why the security sector reform has been one of the major pillars of the
Right.
current political operation.
Ma'am, normally when in conflicts, when you have the military up against a paramilitary force, there's the assumption that the military is more powerful than the paramilitary force. But given the history of the RSF, coming from the Janjaweed, fighting in Darfur, accused of war crimes, crimes against humanity by the International Criminal Court, given that the RSF has fought in their tens of thousands in places like Yemen, they fought in Libya as well, I wonder, are they actually more powerful than the Sudanese military under Burhan?
Well, I don't have information on that, but definitely the Sudanese armed forces is more or in number. It is more in experience, of course. It is more in the tactics. But yes, the rapid support force is more trained in as a rapid support force, as a quickly moving force. And it is not only that, but it has been acknowledged by the European Union to guard the borders between Sudan, Libya, and Chad. And so it is experience also. But the thing is, it was all the time perceived that the Sudanese armed forces is the Sudanese armed forces. It is the number one force of Sudan, and no one would accept to have any comparison between SAF and any other force, of course. But unfortunately, the way now they are dealing, I was startled now. Up till now, I am astonished how the Sudanese armed forces cannot see the importance of protecting the civilians. How the Sudanese armed forces cannot see that they are the protectors of the Sudanese people. How they cannot see having raging a war inside the capital, which is the highest populated place in the whole Sudan, is in that shape. It is for me absolutely amazing
and it's
how
something,
things.
certainly, and it's something that you would be demanding of them as a former foreign minister, as somebody with political status in the country, saying, how can you do this? How can you risk the lives of our own people by fighting against each other? Who has the power to mediate, whether internally or externally, from other countries, institutions? Is there anybody who can get the two sides to maybe even not even sit down, but just to stop the fighting?
Well, as you mentioned, I have been calling on them on direct calls. I did a press statement asking of them to provide just for health saving for safe corridors only for 3 hours, for the people to go back to their homes, for the bodies to be collected from the streets, for people to go and get some food. I have been calling on that. with other groups of Sudanese, also from political backgrounds, from Sufi backgrounds, from international stout. We have been all calling on them. And since the day before yesterday, we started organizing together to call on them collectively. But it seems that at the end of the day, and not only us as the Sudanese, also the international community, the regional community, all our neighbors around, from the Gulf, from our neighbors, the AU, the EU, the Arab League, the UN, they have been all calling on them, and the Troika, and everybody have been calling on them. Yesterday, they declared that they would start this truce for 24 hours. Unfortunately, it didn't hold for minutes, as I told you. Now, we are of course continuing to call, and we are continuing, and we are saying we must have monitoring mechanisms. These monitoring mechanisms, of course, they said both of them, they are calling for international or regional. But whatever it takes, international or regional, it must be started now. It must start as soon as possible. And of course, our people at the end of the day are the ultimate monitors, because they are the ones who have been reporting what is happening everywhere, who have been reporting whether there is violations or whether there is commitment to ceasefire. So if they really take the decision to effect this truce, to effect this cease of fire, even for maybe not 24 hours, because they are more worried about the strategic military positioning more than the humanitarian needs of the people. They don't want to give each other enough time to rest or enough time to get supplies or whatever. So we need now any time for establishing the water to hospitals, because now if anybody gets anything, we don't have hospitals, or our major hospitals, خلاص, they are out, not because of lack of medical.
It's a sort of technical question. Do they have any support on the ground, both sides, whether it's the army or the RSF, when they take control of specific places? Do they have any support from people on the ground there?
Well, this is part of the thing. Generally, the Sudanese people are supportive of the Sudanese armed forces. This is general. But because Sudanese armed forces has been perceived to be supported by the previous regime, and that now many of them are coming to say that this is we are behind this. Of course, rapid support force come from very also well-established social backgrounds. Now that's why, unless we go into ceasefire quickly, they hate speech, and because many of the rapid support force come from specific parts of Sudan, and if this goes this way, it might seriously take us to a national cliff. It might affect the unity of the Sudanese nation. It may take people, unfortunately, to even to civil war. That's why it is not at all advisable for this nonsensical war, which is devastating all the values of the Sudanese people, to go on.
And that's why you need strong leadership.
And there is no winner.
Yes. Yeah, of course. That's why you need strong leadership. And I want to bring this back to your personal history and your family history. Your late father, who was the prime minister, and he was overthrown by Bashir in a coup. He passed away very recently, Allah yarhamu. What would he have made of the situation here in his country?
It wouldn't have reached this state. If my father was here, it wouldn't have reached this state. He was well respected by both of them. He was well believed by both of them and the other civilians, and he wasn't acute. He wasn't exclusivist. He wouldn't accuse one of being the good party and the other is the bad one. He was saying we are all citizens. We should sit together as citizens. Even for the NCP people, he was calling for them to go back and revise and make their pardoning to Sudanese people to buy their future, not to continue harassing the Sudanese people and insisting to govern them by blood and by fire, as they are now doing or trying to do now. So yes, we need leadership. We need to effect the principle of citizenship, that we are all Sudanese citizens. It is not because people from certain parts of Sudan are more privileged, or they are more Sudanese than the others. We should acknowledge that yes, we are working, and we must have one Sudanese army, which is professional and national, and that which we started already through dialogue. But to try to enforce something by force is always, it will fire back. Now, as you mentioned, I agree with you. It's now a matter of leadership, and the leadership must come from the civilians, the Sudanese civilians collectively, and to join with the heads of the two warring parties, to come into terms that the priority is Sudan. Now, they cannot win. Even if they wipe the other party, they cannot win, because already Sudan has lost dearly, and because already each one has a strong root of social support. We don't want to get this level of anger, which is
Yes.
now very personal, which is now
Right.
very personal. We don't want it to spread to be tribal, not to be regional, and definitely not to engage any of the countries around us in the region,
Right.
because this will devastate the whole region, and may create total and serious chaos in the whole continent.
A lot of people refer to you as the Sudanese Kandake. I'm not entirely sure what it means, but I think it means something very big and very great, as a sort of warrior queen, if you like. In the situation that might bring about some sort of ceasefire or dialogue, are you open to sitting with the two sides and maybe taking on a role to try and transition back to civilian rule?
Of course, this is what we all aspire for, and this is what we all wanting for. And we have been starting across differences now for the last, especially for the last 3 days, across political differences, across social differences, across ideological differences, to try to reach out to establish the ceasefire and ending of the war. And after ending of the war, we really need to address what is happening in a new perspective. Yes, we all want justice. Yes, we all want stability. Yes, we want development. We want to see our country as in the highest positions. But we need to start acknowledging our right as Sudanese people, and unless we address our differences, even amongst the people who have addressed, have done atrocities, unless we reach out to each other, we will continue warring to establish our own position, and we will devastate this beautiful, generous country with these very good people, because we want all to establish what we think as 100%. The perspective of transitional justice versus the perspective of reconciliation, now there is a serious need for looking into that. And of course, unless we all come into terms in this, and we abandon this high vindictive note everyone is pursuing, especially amongst the warring group, Sudan will be totally devastated, and this is very bad and very shameful, and it's a responsibility of each one of us who have a voice, who have a place, a position to affect that. The Al Burhan and Hemeti, of course, take the highest responsibility, but this doesn't pardon us as politicians, even the ones who think we committed mistakes, like the Communist Party, the Ba'ath Party, other parties who thought sitting with the army or talking with the army was a mistake. Well, now the army took the only language they are trained to do, and they are devastating the country. Will we still continue pointing fingers at each other and accusing each other, or we must now try to be Sudanese, responsible for Sudan, and put our country Sudan as our priority,
Right.
and put the safety and the prosperity of our Sudanese people are as our goal. This is a question. This is a direct responsibility for each one of us.
Mariam Al-Mahdi, I would love to continue the conversation. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I look forward to hopefully talking to you again sometime very soon, hopefully when the guns fall silent. I thank you so much for taking the time amidst a lot of conflict and chaos, in danger in Khartoum. Thank you so much for talking to us here on the InnerView. I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much, Mr. Imran. Thank you.
Bye-bye.